Recording in progress. So welcome to lecture 4. Today we're going to be dealing with rendering sequences for animation. We're going to do one render in Arnold. You're going to pick either the Cornell rabbit or the still life that you did in project 3. That's going to be your lighting. I've got an animated camera import into the scene, and you will use that camera to render out the frames. Now, the difference between that and a normal Arnold render is we're going to be using Maya's render view to render out. Because in Arnold, if you try to batch render, Arnold has a watermark on it. So, and that batch render is reserved for commercial users. Well, not watermark, but that batch render is reserved for commercial users. So even Arnold, in their docs, they say, you know, if you're using the free version, then you will want to use Maya's render view and you can render a sequence out of Maya. Not as elegant, but it works. Downside is it tends to crash a little more than Maya normally does. So be prepared for starting and restarting your renders. Now, the nice thing is with a sequence, if it fails and you've got 5 good frames, well, you start at frame 6. You don't have to re-render everything over from the very beginning. We're also going to be using Unreal Engine, and the approved Unreal Engine version for Full Sail that we all agreed on is version 4.25.4. That is the least dramatic version of Unreal with the max that we have, that we could tell. So we did a bunch of testing. Some of us could get 4.26 to work, others of us couldn't, and 4.25 seemed to be the most stable one. That's what our game art colleagues also use. So we decided to go with the same thing across the whole platform. So let's go get on here. All right, so I will have office hours tomorrow, 10 to 4, Thursday, 10 to 4. Frank and or Ari will be running the Zoom Open Lab on Thursdays for us from 1 to 5 p.m. That is for campus and online students. It's optional. Like I said, we can give you lots of support in Discord, but as far as being able to screen share with multiple users, that doesn't really happen all that much. Just a reminder, there will be no campus lectures on Fridays in May. We're still kind of in our trial phase to see what the interest is for people coming to campus. So far, good. So far, 5 of you, 6 of you. So we'll see how that pans out. I know they're going to expand it more in June. And starting, I think, June, July, either July or August, they're looking to go mainly campus. If you have a good reason to be, off campus, then you can certainly do that. But I know they're looking to try and get as many people back. All right, just public service announcement. If you have a chance to get a vaccine and you haven't, please do. It's a good thing to do. Pretty much when education opened up, like most of us at Full Sail, we just went and got it. So I highly recommend you guys, if you're not vaccinated, please do it. Do it for your family, do it for other people. But it will help. Okay, so on-campus students, please no headphones, earbuds during lecture. Also, please remember, put your phones on silent, because I forget to do that once in a while, and there's nothing more annoying than having your phone go off. And while we were doing Zoom, it really wasn't an issue when we were just totally remote learning. But now, You know, it really makes a difference. All right, so batch rendering will be due tomorrow night, which is May 11th. Quite frankly, the lecture isn't all that much in the theory part. It's mostly in the demo part. And lecture is about an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, depending on what we do. But after that, it's going to be kind of a work scenario for you guys. So my goal is to get you the tools you need so you can start doing this stuff, because it's not hard, but it takes a long time. Be prepared for the Arnold portion of the render too. Let's take a poll here. What did everybody get as their final render time for either the Cornell Rabbit or the still life? Final version. If anybody tells me hours, I will laugh. All right, so Miles got like 9 minutes. We got 9, we got 3 minutes, we got 2:15, 1:48, whoa. 6 minutes, oh, Miles did 6 and 8, yep, okay, a minute, 3 minutes. The average is roughly about 3 minutes a frame. You know, 9 minutes maybe is not unheard of, but 3 to 4 minutes is roughly about the average time for that to render. Now, the Cornell Rabbit or the still life has 70 frames of animation. So 70 frames times, let's say 3 minutes, comes out to, and since I am not a math whiz, let's do this. All right, so we got 70 times 3, 210 minutes. Divide that by 60 minutes to the hour, and that's 3.5 hours. So think, I would say budget 4 hours for safety. Just because, oh dear, Maya crashed, or I forgot to plug my computer in, it ran out of battery. You know, the usual scenarios that happen, Maya crashed, whatever. So budget at least 4 hours. The processing part, once the renders are done, taking it into After Effects doesn't really take that long. It's a pretty simple step, and honestly, I hate to say this, but After Effects is pretty bulletproof. Once you have everything down, it's really a good app. It'll process everything. But it's the bottleneck of wait. That's really what we're all about here. Just budgeting that wait time. Now, it's a good time if you've got sketching to do where you're doing, you know, kind of poses for animation or whatever you're doing that doesn't require Maya. Good time to do that. All right, any questions so far? Diamond's good, thank you. Cody's good. Tiara's good. Miles, question about the last assignment. Go ahead, Miles. Josh is good. Cameron's good. Go ahead.
So when I was doing my assignment for the portrait, the self-portrait,
Yes.
I was looking at all the videos, even our lecture as well. And for some reason, even though I was pressing 6 to turn on the textures, it still wouldn't apply like the actual, like, I guess the skin tone texture for my portrait. So mine just showed up as a somewhat dark gray. And I was trying to ask people on Discord if anybody else has that issue, because I actually restarted I made a new project, opened up downloaded the new zip file, went through it all, and I was still getting the same issue. So I was wondering if anybody got that. I know I'm going to get probably deducted on points.
So what you're saying is that when you went to render, the skin didn't show up when you rendered.
Exactly.
So did you set your Maya project before you open the scene?
I did.
Because you must do that. What version of Maya do you have?
I have the latest one actually.
Which
Let
is
me
what?
let me pull it up real quick. Sorry, it's loading right now. I didn't have it loaded
Okay.
up right now.
Hopefully it's not Maya 2022.
It is Maya 2020.4.
Okay, good. That's good. All right, so let's wait for this to start up. All right, let's go back to project 3. Let's go back here, download the portrait. Because you said you re-downloaded a new version, right?
Oh, I what I did was I downloaded the file again
Right,
from
so you downloaded a new version off of our
yes.
activity. Okay. All right, so first thing you want to do, set project. I'm going to go to my downloads. You set your project here and not in the top level, right?
Yeah. I said it right there where it's highlighted.
Okay, because if you click here and set it, there's actually no file folder structure. So if you click there, click set, go file open, decimated head. So it's in 4, there's 5, there's 6. So mine showed up when I hit 6, but I never really go by that. I usually leave everything in 4. The thing I'm really interested in is, does it look good when I actually render it? So as long as you, now, did you verify that the skin texture was in the project folder in source images?
I'm sorry, let me check on that.
So you go to your project folder, your My Project folder, there should be a source images folder. There should be something called color_map TGA. And then when Arnold gets a hold of it, it converts it to color_map.tx. And then that's kind of pre-calculated. So when you render, it doesn't take forever to look at the image, convert it, figure out what it is. It's already got it done. So Cameron said his didn't show up in perspective, but once you rendered it was okay. Yeah, that's usually what's going on.
Oh, whoops. Sorry, I was in the wrong one. Let me see here.
So I'm just going to go ahead and throw a Arnold area light in there just for fun.
Yeah, even though that file is in there, I went back and set it and everything, and I'm still getting the same thing. It's like a dark gray. It's not showing up the actual like skin texture like it shows on yours.
When you render,
Yes.
you just got done rendering.
Let me
Because
pull up the render.
don't go
Yeah.
by what it looks like in the viewport. You know, always set your project, then open your scene file, then work on it, then try to render. Because if you
Okay.
try to set your project once it's open already, it doesn't always recognize the path.
Okay. Let me just put a light.
You
I'm
did
sorry.
not replace the skin texture, right?
I did not.
Okay, good. All right, let me stop sharing and I want you to share your screen, Miles.
Okay.
Go ahead. You should be able to.
All right. 1 second. Okay. All right. So let me see here.
All right, so walk me through the process again.
Okay. Let me go back out.
Yeah, quit out of Maya.
Okay.
Okay, once you've quit, go ahead and go to the folder where you have your file.
Okay.
So you're in documents, shading and lighting, project 3 or lesson 3.
Mhm. Let's see here.
All right, I'm seeing an MA file outside of the folder structure.
Oh. Yeah, because when I selected that,
So what you should be doing is go down to the Maya project folder,
Mhm.
Maya project Arnold, that's where you set your project.
yeah, and then it should have the workspace dot melt.
Yep.
Yeah, dot melt underneath. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, so go ahead, launch Maya, set your project. And you can ignore that 2021-04 that accidentally got left in there when I had to do a re-upload because we had a
Hmm.
corrupt file. So you worked on the base, right?
Yes, I was working on the base,
Good.
and before starting anything, I was having this issue, but I was like, I don't want it to like hold me up, and then I don't have anything to turn in and get a 0. Like at
Okay.
least try to put effort into it, you know. But I was pretty stumped on that because I was like, well, it's not going to show the skin tone. I know I'll get knocked down, but at least I won't have a 0.
All right, so your render is Arnold.
Let me set it to Arnold. Okay.
All right, close the render settings, set your project. That's not the project folder, I don't think.
Oh, thought it was. It was the portrait.
You have to open it up.
Oh,
There's your
yeah.
Maya project folder. That's what you set your project to.
Okay.
Do you see it? Right there. So set your project.
Okay.
Now go file open.
Base. Open. Okay.
Click OK. You can try hitting 6, see if it works.
Oh, now there it goes.
There you go. Yeah,
Okay.
you got to be careful. Make sure that we always try to be careful naming it to include the word Maya
Mhm.
in there. And also open up any folder you suspect that, oh, that might be the project folder. If it doesn't have that big laundry list of subfolders, it's not the right folder structure.
Okay. So I only I did was I selected the still life portrait and then set it there instead of going one more in and then actually doing it. Okay.
Right. And what happened was, I'm sure the first time you did that, it said, hey, this is not a Maya workspace. Do you want to make it a workspace? And then it creates that workspace.mel file.
Okay.
So it's only the first time that it says, hey, it's not a workspace, but I'll make it one if you tell me to.
Okay. That makes sense now. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Okay. Crisis averted, I think. All righty. Oh, yeah, I guess so can you guys see my screen now? You guys good? Like not there, but in Zoom. Okay, good. Just want to make sure. All right, good. Okay, so let's get started here. Like I said, you have a choice of doing either the Cornell Rabbit or the still life, whichever one you choose or chose to light in project 3. So one of the two camera moves, whichever one, whether it was the Cornell Rabbit or the still life, we'll be doing the Unreal, like I mentioned earlier. You will need Adobe After Effects. So if you haven't downloaded, everybody has it because you guys all have the Creative Cloud. So you want to make sure that you've got Adobe After Effects loaded. Okay, so, lecture is about an hour. I would say 4 hours to render. The simulation, which is the Unreal, honestly, it does not take an hour to render. In Unreal, it takes roughly about 1.5 minutes, maybe, to render 70 frames. But I have an hour there because if you're new to Unreal and you have to kind of hunt and peck around for everything, it's going to take a little bit longer. All right, so I've got some sample renders, or actually movies here, that we made for the Cornell Rabbit. Just a simple kind of orbit for the rabbit, and then the final landing frame is the composition from project 3. So the still life comes kind of from the opposite direction. It's still kind of an orbit with a little bit of a truck in. So Unreal, done in real time. Like I said, it takes about 1.5 minutes to render, but all the prep work, especially if you're new to sequence rendering in Unreal, this is how you would make a cinematic. This is how you would render out a high quality game animation out of there. Now, there are other ways to do it. You can do almost like a play blast out of Unreal, but the quality is not nearly as good. And if you've got an RTX ray tracing card, you know, the sky's the limit if you want to do ray tracing. But I don't have the scene set up for ray tracing because that's a little bit out of the reach of most of our little laptops here. You can thank Ari for the simulation work in there. Ari is our visual effects expert. So if anybody's interested in visual effects, please, hit her up for questions, answers. She is a wealth of knowledge, not only in Maya, she's really gotten good at Unreal, and she's excellent in Houdini. And Houdini is like one of the premier visual effects packages. All right, so for the workflow, I've got docs appropriate to whatever you guys did. So for the Cornell Rabbit, got a workflow doc here that will walk you through all the steps. Same thing with the still life. So it'll walk you through not just the Maya, Arnold part, but also the After Effects. All right, for Unreal, we supply the Unreal project folder structure for you. Unreal is a little bit like Maya in that it uses a lot of subfolders. But the thing is, the Unreal Engine does not really have scene files like Maya does. It has a project file. That project file can contain tons of stuff. It can contain levels. It can contain environments. It can contain pretty much, whatever you want in there. It could be quite large, quite small. Ours is pared down to be pretty small with just basically the necessary files. Like we started out, in order to get all the, fire and smoke and stuff, you start out with the starter pack. in Unreal, and that gives you all that stuff. And then we stripped away everything that was not necessary, which we saved about 1 gigabyte worth of information. So we stripped it down. I think the download's around 80 megabytes. But, you know, if you leave all the standard Unreal stuff in there, it's quite hefty. As you guys probably know, each engine version of Unreal that you download is like a 9 gigabyte download. So if you want to have more than one version of the Unreal Engine, it takes up a lot of space. So we have the workflow for Unreal here. You just have to make sure you're using 4.25.4. Now, a lot of times we're used to, when you launch Unreal, you go to the launcher, you launch the engine, it'll give you a list of stuff that you've worked on previously, usually in the Unreal folder. For the Rabbit, since you're downloading that, that's probably going to wind up in your downloads folder, or you might transfer it to another location. So I've kind of got a quick little tutorial here, just showing you how you can kind of navigate beyond what Unreal gives you for default. Like when I demo this, I'm going to leave it in downloads and just kind of show you how I have to navigate to get to the right spot. So once you're in there, you're going to click on the right level, and then I've got all the steps you need to set up the sequencer. Have you guys done any animation in Unreal yet? In any of the animation classes? You transferred stuff. Okay. So you have to use what's called the sequencer in Unreal in order to be able to get stuff to move. It works a lot kind of like Maya's timeline at the bottom, where you set keys and you can do all kinds of stuff. So we created a sequencer. We did the animation. We did the particles. We did the smoke. We did the rabbit. We did the lighting. Everything's animated in there. That was all done in the sequencer, but you have to set the sequencer up correctly so it only displays the right number of frames, because by default, it's just going to go on and on and on. And then we're going to take, once the sequencer is set up, we're going to take that to the cinematics portion, where you go and you basically render sequence the movie out. Not difficult, probably a little more foreign than Maya, if you're used to using Maya for animation. But it's pretty intuitive, actually. Just the more you use it, the better you get with it. So got the workflow for it. Nice thing is, in Unreal, you can render out EXRs, which is what we're going to be doing. You're not stuck with JPEGs or PNGs or some, low-level file format. Okay. So what we have going on here, let me close that, that's annoying. So for the delivery, don't forget year underscore month, that's 2105 underscore 05. Sorry, 2021 underscore 05. That is what this is, 2021 underscore 05. Okay, so you will be giving us, as far as your downloads go, your Maya scene file and the movie from either Cornell Rabbit or the Still Life. You will deliver back to us the Unreal project folder structure with all your changes saved in the Unreal project, because I will be opening up your projects to make sure that you got the sequencer right, you got the render configuration right, and you got everything all set up correctly. And then, of course, the movie is the final result. So when I look at your movie, I should be able to go, yep. And when I look through Unreal, I can verify that everything is correct. Same with Maya. Now, the only difference is in the Unreal deliverable, once you render all those frames out, you're not going to deliver the frames to me. I only want the movie. Because if you deliver the frames to me, that's like 500 megabyte upload. So you don't want that. I don't want that. FSO probably doesn't even want that. All right, so the workflow is pretty simple. It's pretty similar, actually. The still life, the rabbit, the workflow is identical, except the naming and the file you're using. The Unreal is fairly similar, although unique to Unreal. So like I said, how many people did the Cornell Rabbit? How many people did the still life? So Cornell Rabbit, still life, what do we got? All right, so we got rabbit, rabbit, rabbit. 1, 2, 3, 4. We got a still life. We got 2 still life. Okay. Got a rabbit. Okay, Javier did the still life. We got 3 still lifes, 5 rabbits, 6. All right, so it kind of looks like the rabbit wins. So I'm going to demo the rabbit. Like I said, the still life is identical. The workflow is exactly the same. So let's do that first. So let me clear everything here. And let's bring up the necessary docs. All right, so we're going to do the Cornell Rabbit. So I'm going to bring up the docs for the Cornell Rabbit. Let me go here. Let me get rid of this. Okay, there's my Maya still life. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. All right, so always launch Maya, set project first. Yep, that's it. What? Set project, set root directory of the portrait. I don't care about the root directory of the portrait. There we go. All right, so I'm going to take the Cornell Rabbit, verify that the lighting is, yep, the lighting's there. Let's make sure it looks acceptable. Okay, that looks good. So, got everything. Let's rename it. All right. So, got it renamed. I should be all set to go. Let's look at the instructions. So I set my project, I opened it up. Now I want to download the animated camera for it because right now I've got a still camera. So let's go to the download section. So here is the Cornell Rabbit render cam. If you're doing the still life, there's your render cam for the still life. So let's download that. Now, when you download it, it's only a Maya scene file. There's nothing in it except the animated camera. Everybody hear that? Only the animated camera. There is no geometry, nothing. So what I'm going to do is, let me bring up my lesson 4. Wait, I got a scenes file. What's close that. So lesson 4. So what I'm going to do is copy this into my project folder, which is right here. I'm going to drag it into scenes. This way, everything is in the right location. So now what I need to do is I want to import that animated camera into my scene. But there are some import options you need to be aware of. Because if not, Maya has a tendency to add a lot of extra garbage to a file name when you import it. So we want to strip all that out. Okay, so we go import with the options. So file, import options box. Under import options, under namespace options, make sure use namespaces is unchecked. If it's not, you get a whole bunch of extra garbage down here you don't want. Okay, use namespace unchecked. Resolve not all nodes. You want to resolve clashing nodes. Clashing nodes means if you import the camera and there is a camera in your scene called animated camera, it's going to go, okay, it's named the same. So in order for me to avoid a conflict, I'm going to put the file name with the camera name when I import it. That's how it resolves clashing nodes. So it doesn't overwrite an existing file. So resolve with the file name. So you can do a custom string, but you're asking for trouble. Why? Because take a look at what's after that. This string, there's a colon. So Maya loves to put a colon in the middle of a name, which is kind of counterintuitive to everything else that Maya hates, which is a special character somewhere. So you want to have use namespaces off, resolve clashing nodes with the file name. Click the import button, and then you select your file. Click import, click continue, and there is my animated camera. Right there. And notice I got a nice clean name, CR_anim_rendercam. Doesn't have a colon in it. It's short, it's sweet, to the point. Now, in order to make sure everything works, never trust anything. So go into panels, perspective, and go to the new animated camera. So now we're looking through the animated camera. Let's set up the timeline to make sure that we have the correct number of frames. Because if not, it's going to look like it stops and then continue the timeline. So the start of the animation, start of the playback range are both the same at 1. End of the animation, end of the playback range are both the same at 70. So in the timeline here in Maya, you kind of close that. So here is the start animation, start playback range, and you just want to change the end of both to 70. So now, in theory, you should be able to hit the play button, and Maya will play it back for you. Now, if yours is going through at light speed, just maybe going, that's probably because it's not doing it in real time. So under preferences, where is it? Playback. Displays, UI elements.
Also, what you could do is on the timeline, you can actually right click, and then I believe it's playback, and then the speed, you can change it to real time on there as well.
So right on top of the timeline?
Yes. So where it has the frames, just right click, and then where it says playback speed.
Yeah, good idea. Thank you. So right click on that timeline. Yeah, that's a good shortcut. And go to real time. Because if you play every frame, it's liable to blow through it at light speed. So you definitely want real time. So excellent, thank you. Time slider. Can also change it here. So excellent. And you just hit save. If you changed anything, we didn't. There we go. So excellent tip. Thank you. So now we want to set our render settings up so we can render out the sequence in Maya's render view. So everything gets set up as though we were going to render it in Arnold. So file name, just going to give it something short and sweet. Image format, EXRs, compression, zip. Make sure that you turn on merge AOVs. Merge AOVs we need because we're going to denoise this separately, because when you're using Maya's render view, it doesn't have that denoise post imager in it. But Arnold has a bulk kind of denoiser you can run it through, which is a good thing to have. So you need to turn that on because under AOVs, we want to turn on output denoising AOVs. And that way it will embed in the file. So when we run that denoiser process after all the frames are rendered, we'll get filtered frames, and those filtered frames are what we use in After Effects. All right, so turn on merge AOVs, color space, use output transform. We want to change the frame animation extension. Right now it's a single frame. We want the one underneath where it says name.number.extension. What it's going to do, if you take a look at the top underneath the common tab, it'll kind of give you a quick little, oh, here's the file name. And it's CR_anim for me. It starts at frame 1, EXR, and ends at frame 10. Okay, well, I don't want that. Now, frame padding. It's kind of grayed out, which is ridiculous. But frame padding means how many digits will be allocated for your frame numbering. Now, I've got 1 so far, but I don't like using 1 because there's a good chance it could at some point start to overwrite the frame numbers. So I usually use 3. 3 will give me 001, 2070. Right now, I don't have that set up yet, but all right, so just as a quick note, if Maya crashes after a couple of frames, you can change your frame range start. So right now, the frame range is set to start at 1, end at 10. I'm going to change mine to 70 because I'm hoping that Maya will render all 70 frames without crashing on me. By frame 1 means it will render every frame. If you're trying to do a stop motion effect, you could render on the 2s, you could render on the 4s, on the 6s. You could set it up to render every second or every 4th or every 6th frame. So you'll kind of get that stop motion look. For us, we don't want that. We want to render every frame. And again, if Maya is crashing, you can try smaller ranges and just pick up where the last good frame is. Renderable cameras, make sure you only have a single camera. Since we imported a camera, it's dropping another name into the render view. And if you accidentally forget, guess what happens? Cody said, what does AOV stand for? It is an arbitrary output variable. It's basically output options that you want to have. That is kind of standard terminology for renderers to use. Just know that they are render either layers or features that you've got turned on top of the standard look pretty beauty pass that we get. That's how you embed certain things into files for, like, for example, you can embed all kinds of compositing flags in there, like depth. It'll do Z depth. It'll do color variations for the compositor. So when they bring it in, they can do things with those different layers or different depth fields. They can apply filters in there. For us, the only AOV we care about is the denoise. Good question. All right, so down here, renderable cameras, make sure you get rid of the first camera that was in there, which is the render cam. Click the trash. It doesn't delete it. It just stops you from having two cameras that it will render from. If you leave that in there and render, you will have to wait for 140 frames because it will render one camera and then start on the second camera. All for nothing. So got all your cameras here. Set it up, the size, pre-done already, HD 540. So Arnold sampling tab here, can set it up to render. Can set it up for 6, set up for 4, for 8. Kind of got mine set at 4 and 8. We're not doing anything with system. The only thing we need to worry about under AOVs is output denoising AOV. So honestly, you can use these same render quality settings you use for project 3. So now at this point, this is where we go to Maya's render view. Maya's render view is the little eye icon in the same list of icons that the render settings are in. You know, everybody's got the same icon. It's a little eyeball. RenderMan's got it. Even V-Ray, except they call it a frame buffer. But it's really a render view. So this is Maya's render view. You must have it. It does look different because it's Maya. Notice it already says, oh, Arnold renderer, because it knows you've got Arnold set up to be your renderer. So once you're in here, we want to go up to the render menu, go to render, sequence down at the bottom, and you want to go to the options. The reason you want to go to the options, you want to verify that the current frame you're going to render from is in fact what you have in your render settings, which is the animated camera. 99% of the time, it will be the right camera, but I've had it where it has been perspective or some other weird camera. So always verify it. Now, after everything's verified, we're going to go down here and click the render sequence and close button. This is where you wait. Now, in the render view, doesn't look like anything's happening, but it is. Don't expect to see a finished frame. For some reason, at least on my computer, it just prints out, or not really print, but displays a gray box. When it's done, the image usually pops in, but don't rely on that either. So I'll let it go for a couple frames before I stop it, because we're not going to wait for 4 hours while I render out. That's ridiculous. I want to get on and show you how After Effects works. So you can kind of get an idea when it's done rendering. It'll display the settings. It'll display the time at the bottom on the left. Actually, what I should have done was turn down the render settings, so even a frame or two would not take forever. But I'm recording, I'm streaming, I'm rendering. Oh yeah, and I got my talking head video on, which doesn't help. Let me stop that. All right, so it's still rendering, rendering, rendering. Says 100%. There we go. Frame one, how long did it take? 2 minutes, 22 seconds. So now in theory, it should start to kick off the second frame. There we go. It wrote the first frame. So now, if you wanted to, you could go into your project folder. You could go and take a look at your So this is the one I just did. It looks like the one from last month. Yep, it is. All right, so it's going into my images folder. So there we go. This is not denoised. So you have to wait for all 70 frames to finish before you can actually run the denoiser. Now, if Maya crashes, like I said, you've got one good frame, start at frame 2. If you've got 10 frames done, it crashes, start at frame 11. Do it in smaller blocks if it's crashing. Now, as far as canceling a render, that's a really good question. Nobody asked yet. So what happens if you hit the render button and then go, oh crap, I forgot to do something? Maya does not really have a cancel button, which is very sad. And it runs really sluggish while it's rendering. So you could try hitting close, but nothing really happens. Honestly, I hope you saved your scene because you're going to have to force quit out of Maya, which is downside. Let it go just another couple minutes and see if we can't get 2 frames at least. So right now it's trying to finish up, write it. There we go. So like I said, not very forgiving, unfortunately. All right, so I got 2 good frames. The third one, I killed it in the middle of it, so that's no good. All right, now, in theory, you've got all your frames rendered. So I'm going to show you how to pick up the pieces and then run the denoiser and then go into After Effects. Anybody have any questions so far? Okay, Cody's good. Miles is good. Balin, got any questions? Good. Josh, Marissa, Diamond, any good? Okay, Diamond's good too. Marissa's good. All right, Tamari's good. Craig is good. Thank you. All right. So, got frames done. Well, going to assume we've got frames done. So here's my Cornell rabbit. What is it? All right, so I got some finished frames here. I'm going to swap out. Through the magic of editing, you won't even notice that I'm doing this. There we go. All right, so yeah, it's named wrong, but these are the right frames. And these are not denoised. At least they shouldn't be. So what I want to do is run the Arnold denoiser. So let's take a look at the docs. So wait for all the frames to finish before you run the denoiser. Right, like I said, since we're using Maya's render view, we actually have to use Arnold's standalone denoiser. So that can be found in the Arnold menu. Under Utilities, and it's the very first selection, Arnold denoisers noise. So it's kind of got the same settings that the imager does, a little bit different. You've got an input. The output is based on your project folder structure. So I'm going to click the input because I want to grab the frames. So it should be your images folder right here. All you need to do is select the very first frame, click select. Notice that the output changed automatically. It went to images, and it's going to add the word denoised to the frames when it's done. So you want to set your frame range, start at 1, end at 70, which is pretty simple. Start frame 1, frame 70. Temporal stability, leave it at 0. We don't need any extra frames. The variance is at 0.3. We'll set it for 0.25. Once you do that, though, it rounds up to 3, so don't worry about it. It's still set at 0.25. The pixel search radius at 9. The patch radius at 3. Those are the same settings we used inside the Arnold, the denoiser imager in the Arnold render view. We don't have any AOV light groups. Once you've got all those settings in, click the denoise button. Down in the bottom left, it will now go through and denoise all your frames. Now, this could take 5-10 minutes to do also. So while that's going on, let's see what we have. So now it goes through and adds in the word denoised after the frames. The denoised versions are the ones we're going to take into After Effects because they've already been smoothed out, gotten rid of any extra or excess noise. So you wait for all 70 frames to finish. Now, the nice thing is if for some reason Maya crashes and you have to start the denoise again, you should be able to start where the last good denoised frame was. So here, just make sure, yep, that's a full frame. So right now, if Maya were to crash, I could start at frame 11. So all I would do is go in, instead of selecting the first frame, I would select frame 11, let it finish denoising. Does that make sense? Yes, that's exactly right, Cody. They all get dropped into the same folder. The good news is that After Effects is smart enough where if you select the denoised version of your frame number, it's going to look for all the similar names. It's going to not look at the ones that don't have denoised on them. Now, you can also select all the denoise frames, move them to another folder if it makes you feel better. And then, when you run After Effects, just go to that folder and get your frames. Same with the render. The render is going to go into the images folder because we're using Maya. If you're using Arnold, Arnold likes to tuck it into the temp folder, but Maya drops it into the top level. And like I said, we're not using Arnold's batch renderer because it paints a watermark on each image. All right, so I'm going to cancel this and pretend that we got all the frames denoised. All right, so we got quite a few frames. That's not bad. So probably would have taken another 2 or 3 minutes, maybe 4. If you guys aren't streaming and you're not doing a bunch of stuff, probably take you less time to denoise. All right, so at this point, I'm just going to go and grab my denoised frames. Which are down here. I stuck them in a separate folder. All right, now, before you launch After Effects, save your Maya scene file and make sure you quit out of Maya, quit out of Photoshop, because Photoshop is a memory hog, Maya is a memory hog, After Effects is a super memory hog. So I find that After Effects, well, when I'm trying to stream and record a video session, my computer can't handle running After Effects at the same time with Maya. Maybe yours can. I don't have any luck. Same thing with me and Unreal and Maya. I got to quit out of one or the other. Can't have Unreal or Maya running at the same time, and Maya running. All right, so let's see. So I'm going to quit out of Maya. I've got all my frames done. How often does Full Sail get you a new computer? The last one I had was 6 years old. I just got this one in December. So the other one was 6. I mean, it still worked. It wasn't bad. It just was a whole lot slower. a whole lot slower. I mean, I was really amazed. Like, wow, this is what technology is like. Okay. So any questions so far before I kick off After Effects? How about there in the Zoomosphere? So still life, if you chose to do the still life, the workflow is identical. Everything's pretty much the same. Different scene file, obviously, but the process is still the same. All right. So we've got all our frames done. Now we launch After Effects. Come on, wake up. Where are you? I see you trying to load. There we go. Okay. So when you first open After Effects, you will get the home page, which looks like this. And what you want to do is click New Project. And that will bring you to kind of the project window in After Effects. And you want to select Create a New Composition from Footage. A composition in After Effects is what is the size of your composition? That's the size of your frames in pixels. How many are there? What are the settings? And it will gather most of the information it needs from your actual frames. And that's why it says create a new composition from footage. Because what's going to happen is once we click this button, it's going to say, okay, where are your frames? So you go digging for them. I got my frames. They're down here under denoised. So I'm going to select my first denoised frame. And it goes, oh, okay, OpenEXR, it's footage. OpenEXR sequence. Right now, it's understanding that I want all those frames with that same name because it sees that I have a frame number on there. So I say, yep, I do. Click open. What it will do is import all the frames that are in that folder with that same name, create the correct size of the composition, which is 960 by 540. You can see up here, 30 frames a second. That's good. That's what we want. That's video. It's basically 2 seconds and 10 frames, which is 70 frames. And now that I've got my timeline down here, it even put all my frames in a layer in the timeline. And if I hit the space bar, it should kind of jerkily go through until it creates the preview. There we go. So now it recognizes my movie. All my frames are now playing as an animation. So create new project, new composition from footage, navigate to your folder where you have the frames, select the first denoised frame. It'll recognize it's an EXR, that it's a bunch of frames, and it'll create the composition. So now in After Effects, we got a little bit of work to do. At this point, I would say save your After Effects project. I like to save it into the folder where the frames are because like Maya, After Effects needs to know where that link is. Where are the frames? Right, so I'm going to put it into my denoised files or denoised frames folder. And let's call this CR Anim 2021-05. So now if anything happens, I've got a project. I can just open up After Effects. It'll load the frames in because it knows where they're at. And I can pick up where I left off. So now what we need to do is create a new text layer so we can put a watermark on our movie, just like we do in Photoshop. So down here in the timeline, make sure you got the timeline selected. Go up to Layer, New Text. That will drop in a new text layer, put it on top of your frames. You can see down here it says empty layer. So I'm going to put in my usual last name, first name, and 2021-05. Now you'll notice that it took my watermark and kind of ran off the screen with it. We can adjust that. The easiest way to adjust it is down in the layer itself. So select your layer and expand it. There's a little arrow icon next to your layer on the left. Expand it and you'll see there's text, which is what your watermark is, in transform. You want the XY position because then you can simply move it around. And notice that these are blue. Anything blue in After Effects means it's either kind of a link to take you to a window or it's a virtual slider. In this case, this is a virtual slider. So I can just kind of drag it around where I want. So easy to do. You can also type it in if you know where you're going, if you know your positions. Down at the bottom, you want to make sure the opacity is set to 15%. Make it yellow. Make the opacity 15. I'm not going to use the slider. I'm just going to type it in. And there we go. So at this point, we're pretty much set up to output this to a movie, because this is really all you have to do. Bring your frames in, put a watermark on it, make sure everything works, everything's good. Just going to hit play again just to make sure it works. Yep, looks good. Going to kind of collapse that new layer so I don't get distracted by all the shiny things inside of it. And now we're set to export our footage to a movie. So you want to select your composition, which is up here. Select the composition. Go up to File, Export, Add to Render Queue. So yes, you have to render it out of After Effects. So that brings up the little tab that's next to the timeline called the Render Queue. All right, so in the render queue, we need to change a couple of things. We don't need to change the render settings. We do need to change the output module simply by clicking on that little blue lossless. It's actually a button. And that will bring up the output module settings. Now, if you are on a PC, your format is probably AVI, so you will need to change it to QuickTime. Why QuickTime? Because we're going to be using the Apple ProRes codecs. That's the compression to compress, decompress when a player reads the files. They're kind of industry standard. So make sure your format is set to QuickTime. Then format options. Click on that. Right now it's set to animation. We want to change it to be Apple ProRes 4444. That's a good balance between quality and speed and file size for the movie. So all of that is in here. Apple ProRes 4444. Once you're done, click OK. At the bottom left, audio output, I always turn that off. Nothing bad will happen, but I really don't need After Effects to even spend the time trying to figure out if the file's got audio in it. It doesn't. So I'm just going to click OK. At this point, I'm going to save my scene again, or my project. One more thing, you want to change the location that it will output the movie to. So I'm going to make sure that it's going into my denoised frames folder, which is where my After Effects project is. And CR Anim. It's going to be 2021-05, and MOV is the file format. Click Save. Now, the only thing left to do is click the render button all the way on the right. When it's done, it'll kind of play like a woody kind of xylophone sound, which means that you've got your movie. Yeah, it renders really fast. Because really all it's doing is just taking all of them, putting them into basically a continuous file for the movie player to read. All right, so check your movie before you quit out. Here's my movie. Double click on it. I'm going to hit the space bar. There we go. So one word of caution, when you render out the movie in QuickTime, go up to Window and turn on the movie inspector. Just verify you got the right codec, the right format. Should be Apple ProRes 4444, because that's what I do when I grade. I mean, when I play the movie, I'm looking at that. I'm looking at the resolution, and I'm just making sure everything visually matches what the setting should be. And then I look at your Maya scene file to make sure you've got all of the render settings set up also. All right, so that takes care of After Effects and the Cornell Rabbit. Any questions? Go ahead.
I'm not entirely sure where I got lost or I got mixed up. So you rendered in Maya. You rendered in the Maya sequencer or whatever it's called.
It's the yeah, it's Maya's render view.
Yeah. And then you ran a separate thing that was Arnold's denoiser.
Correct.
Did that go on top of the render? Well, what happened to the renders that you did in the Maya?
Well, it wrote the file. So here are the original renders.
Okay.
Well, actually, I can show you mine. I had to cancel it halfway through because we don't have time.
So it runs the.
But it runs the denoiser. Here's your frame before it's denoised. Here's your frame after it's denoised. So you'll get two sets of files. When you go into After Effects, you're going to just navigate to your Maya images folder where you have your project set. Select the first denoised frame. Even if you have all your frames in here, After Effects will be smart enough to go, oh, okay, there's a frame number and denoised. I'm going to grab all the frames that have a frame number and denoised and put those into the scene.
I got that. I think my confusion was you had like a full, because I remember when you were rendering, you got what, two frames or something like that, like only a couple of frames. And but then when you ran the denoiser, you got like.
Well, that's because I had pre-done frames already, because I was not going to make you guys wait 4 hours for me to render out all the frames. So yeah, for a demo like this where there's animation frames, I've always got pre-done frames already. I'm showing you how it does it. You know, I could sit around with my feet on the desk, but that's really like no fun at all.
And so is the reason why you're doing it separately because there's no, in the Maya render view, there's no way to like add it in during the render like we did with Arnold?
Yeah, Maya does not have any denoise capabilities. And we're just basically borrowing Maya's it's not really a render. Well, it is a render view, but we're really not rendering in Maya. We're still using the Arnold engine. We're just using the Maya interface because it will render a sequence. Whereas Arnold, you can only do one frame. Like I said, batch rendering in Arnold exists, but the problem is there's a watermark that gets slapped on top of it unless you're a commercial user. So it's kind of a hack, but it's a hack that Arnold actually recommends in their documentation. Make sense? Good question, though. Very good question. All right. Anybody else got questions out there in the Zoom world? Looks like everybody's pretty good. All right. So now we're going to move on to Unreal. All right. So going to load the Unreal directions. So I want to download the Bunny Burn Unreal project, which is all the way down here at the bottom, right there, 73 meg. All right, now for this, definitely make sure that you don't have either Maya or After Effects running. All right, so there is my Unreal project folder. So I've downloaded it. It's uncompressed. Honestly, I'm going to leave it in downloads. You can put it wherever you want it. Unreal ideally expects it to be in the Unreal folder on your computer with all the other Unreal projects. But realistically, nobody does that. All right, so I'm going to run the Unreal launcher, which is really Epic Launcher. All right, so now I'm going to go to library, the top here. And no, I don't want to update you. If for some reason you launch this and you don't have 20 or 4.25.4, you click add like this, and then choose the version that you want to install. So this is the gold version. I'm going to click launch and wait. Because now Unreal is going to run through, and theoretically it should open the editor for me and basically open up the, hey, what do you want to open window? There we go. So a lot of times if you've stuck your stuff in the Unreal folder, it'll show up here under recent projects. Like I said, click the More button right here. And believe it or not, there's a Browse button down at the bottom. And I'm going to navigate to my downloads. There's my Bunny Burn. And there's the actual project I want to open. So More, Browse, go to your Downloads folder or the folder, wherever you happen to have that project folder. And then click on the actual project and click Open. So like I said, we've stripped this down, so it shouldn't take forever to open. It opens up to a blank, it looks like a blank scene, but we actually have the bunny in a new level. So down at the bottom here, under your content browser, double click, and that will load our flaming bunny in. So this is the viewport, just like it is in Maya. So I'm going to change cameras. I want to go to my cinematic camera. It's called Cinematic Actor or Cinecamera Actor 1. Don't change the camera angle. It's all set up for you. So you can see the bunnies there burning, waiting to be rendered, just like itching. So now we go into what's called the world outliner, which is like the outliner in Maya. We're going to click on the Be Burn level sequence. This will open, or this will give you the attributes for the sequencer. When you click on that, just go down to Open Level Sequence under General, and that will open up the sequencer. So here's my sequencer. Here's all the stuff that I have in there. There's only a couple things you really need to do in the sequencer. Okay, the first is to make sure that you've only got 70 frames visible. So right here under playback options, if you click on that, you want to set your start, keep it at 0, and your end, you want to put it at 70. There we go. Now to make sure everything works, hit the play button inside the sequencer. And basically, that makes the bunny burn. So you can still see the particles are still kind of puffing there. Now, once you've done that, before you close the sequencer, you want to make sure you save those settings, because when I open up Unreal, I'm going to check your sequencer to make sure you've got the right frame range. So again, playback options, 0, 70. Click the little save button here. Little picture of a disk with an asterisk on it. Once you've done that, it's saved. Play it back. Now we're going to go up to the window menu in Unreal. We're going down to cinematics, and we're going to movie render queue. We don't want sequence recorder because that's kind of like doing a play blast out of Maya. It just records in your viewport. Right, so window, cinematics, movie render queue. It's empty. You want to click the green add render button and choose the new level sequence that we have. Now, under settings, this is how you configure your render settings. So you have to click on it. And we're going to change our render settings. We're going to be adding a couple of things here. So under plus settings, it's green, anti-aliasing, high resolution, and down at the bottom, output EXR, 16-bit. We want to turn off JPEG because we don't want JPEG movie frames. So now that should match everything you need. Anti-aliasing, high resolution, EXR. Turn off JPEG. Now we're going to go up under presets, and you want to save the settings you have as a preset. The only thing you have to do is name it down here at the bottom. So just give it your name. Down here. Hit save. So now, click accept. I'm going to go back and check them. So usually what happens when I open up your Unreal project, it'll come up with untitled settings. I'll just go into presets, load your settings in, and everything should be good. Now, there's one thing you want to do before you want to make sure before you start outputting, you want to make sure you change the output. Now, the directory, it's going to put it into the correct folder where you've got your frames. We're going to change the resolution to 960 by 540. We're going to use the custom frame rate. We're not doing 24 frames. We're going to do 30. Down at the bottom, we're going to turn on use custom playback. We're going to start at 0 and end at 70. Click accept. That way, that should lock all your settings in. All right, so what I did was I made all those settings, but I had saved my preset before I saved it. So what I need to do is resave my preset. 960 by 540. This is how you can test your stuff. Custom frame rate, 30 frames a second. Start at 0, end at 70. I'm going to go up here. So if you don't save your preset, that's what you get. Ideally, you want to save your preset after you change your output options. If you forget, you have to go back and do it just like I am. Save preset. Yep, I want to replace the one I had there because that is not saved. So I hit accept. Now, if I go back and check my presets, it saved all my settings. Does that make sense? So if you accidentally forget or do it out of order, go to output, change all your stuff, go back to presets, hit save again, rename it, replace the one you got there. There should only be one with your name on it. All right, does that make sense? So I always like to factor in that somebody made a mistake because we all do it. There are ways around, anything. So you hit accept. And at this point, you are ready to render. So you want to hit the render local button. And that will basically bring up kind of a low res preview. And that's it. We're done. Now, before you quit out, make sure you save So we did all this. You want to save all. That way, it will make sure that everything got saved. That should be your sequencer settings, and it should be your movie render queue settings. So now, should be able to quit out of Unreal since everything was saved. Where's your stuff? It's going to be in the saved folder in movie renders. So here are all the frames. So I'm just kind of stepping through them. Nothing really happens until there, when the rabbit spontaneously combusts. Okay. So those are all the frames. You don't have to worry about denoising. It's pretty clean. So once you've done that, now you're set to work in After Effects. And it's going to be the same process that we did with the Arnold, the Cornell rabbit. All right, so first thing I want to do, I got to quit out of my launcher. And let's open up After Effects again. Should open up a little quicker this time. Same process, new project, new composition from footage. We're going to navigate this time to my downloads, my Unreal project saved. Movie renders, select the first frame. Okay, open EXR, footage, sequence, click open. And there we go. I'm going to hit space bar. And there's my Unreal movie. So now it's just a matter of adding in the watermark. Which all you have to do, well, actually, I'm going to save my project first. Why? Because it's Maya, it's Unreal, it's After Effects, it's Adobe, it's all a conspiracy to drive you crazy. So let's go Unreal Engine, Anim. Same folder. Go down, select the timeline, go to layer, new, text. We do the same thing. Can't even spell my own name. If you want to, well, you're going to have to move your watermark. So you basically go down to the timeline, expand your text layer. You want transform, you want X, and then Y position. Change your opacity, 15%. Save your project. Now all you have to do is select your composition, go File, Export, Add to Render Queue. We're going to change the output module. Same deal. Click on that little lossless blue. It's actually a button. Format, make sure it's QuickTime. Format options. This time for Unreal, we're changing it up. We're using Apple ProRes 422 LT. Slightly different codec, a little less compression than actually, it's a little more compression than the Cornell Rabbit, but gives good results. Click OK. Going to turn the audio off. As always, click OK. Choose a new folder for your output. Click OK. All these settings are here. Hit render. Again, really quick. Save your scene. Before you quit out, it's always a good idea to check your movie. There we go. Movie's good. Save your composition, quit out. And you're all set. So a couple of things at the bottom. Before submitting your Unreal folder, you want to remove all the contents of your movie renders folder. In fact, well, obviously, what you want to do is make sure that you have the movie for us. This folder comes out. And then the Unreal project folder gets zipped. And that's what you give to me. Now, before you zip your project folder, make sure you guys have it named correctly. So for campus, it's going to be last name underscore first name underscore project 4 underscore UE Unreal Editor or Unreal Engine Anim SAL-C 2021 underscore 05. You don't have to have the word campus. The O is for online. Remove all frames. It's going to cut down a lot on the size of the upload. Yeah, that's almost 200 megabytes. All right, so any questions? Well, Cody, you got to understand that was fast at rendering. That's because it's real time versus software render. So to get the speed, you have to do all the processing up front, you know, in your Unreal folder, or actually Unreal Engine does all the processing for you because it's designed to run in real time. So there's a lot of things going on. The lighting is baked in. The textures are all baked in. The only thing that's really running dynamically are the particles. And that's all pre-calculated in a cached file that Unreal takes care of. So when it goes to render, it's just basically reading information. It's kind of like everything's pre-rendered. It's reading it and just writing it. Because there's a lot of cache that goes on behind the scenes of a game engine. That's why sometimes when you open up a brand new game, man, it takes forever to load all the files in because it's got to cache. It's got to figure out, what do I have to cache? What do I have to write? Where do I write it to? Once it gets all that, every time you play the game, it's just going to go in, take all of the stuff you've done already, and then start from there. And anything new, you know, new transition, new level, it may be a little bit of wait time to load everything in. Yeah, and it's just apples and oranges when you render. You know, software, a little softer looking because of the cinematic real lenses most of the time when you guys are working on film. Whereas real time, everything is here and now, everything's a little sharper. We've got a lot of cinematic effects in Unreal. You can mimic real world cameras now, cinematic cameras, cinematic lenses. So Unreal is really just not a game engine anymore. It's really a tool for telling stories, basically. Hope that makes sense. Questions? On FSO, under deliverable image, under the Maya is that movie file, the play blast. Let's see, Miles. I'm not sure I understand what your question is.
Okay, so if you go to the 4.1 practice and you go down to where it says deliverables, and it has like basically the breakdown of what we should have in our folder. It has the Maya file that I see underneath. It has the same thing, but it says .mov, MOV. I was trying to figure out if that is the play blast from Maya or is that from After Effects.
We don't run a play blast in Maya.
Okay,
Remember,
so
we rendered all the frames in Arnold, and then we took it into After Effects to make the movie.
Okay, so that's the After Effects one.
That is correct.
Okay, I'm just making sure.
Same thing with Unreal. Down at the bottom, it has the Unreal Engine animation. It says .mov. That's the movie we just made from rendering out of Unreal all those EXR frames. Good question, though. Anybody else got any questions? All right. Well, this is a good time to take a break. We'll take a break. When we come back, start working on, I would suggest do Unreal first because it's a quick get. That way, if we have any issues, we can deal with that. And then when we go on break, hopefully you'll have some time. You can set your stuff up and start rendering, and then go back to lab with Ari in case you have any issues like, oh, Maya's crashing or stuff isn't working. So we can kind of get you covered in both parts. So if there are no questions, we're going to take a short break. Let's see, it's 10:51 now. So let's come back at 11:18. I should have the first part of lecture rendered out. And basically you guys will work, and I'm here, Ari's here. We can help you guys if you need anything. All right, so if there are no questions, I'm going to stop recording.